Hello, and welcome to my 300 subscribers special. I know it's a little late, but better late than never. And for this special occasion, I decided to do my second top 10 list. That being something that's in the same vein as my first top 10 list, but instead of movies, I decided to do TV shows. Although I will throw in a disclaimer, that being, I'm not really the biggest fan of the entertainment medium that is television. Because unlike movies, with something like a TV show, you really have to commit more time and energy into watching this particular piece of entertainment medium as opposed to a movie. And even when you do sit down to watch a TV show that you really do enjoy, there are some TV shows that are either great but potentially only lasted one season because they got canceled, or you have some TV shows that started out great but as time progressed, the quality of the writing suffered so greatly to a point where you wish the show had ended sooner, or if the show does end, it ends in a very disappointing way. And with the advent of streaming services, there are so many TV shows being produced left and right that you can't keep track of all of them. No matter if the TV show in question was produced through that particular streaming service or potentially catching up with a classic that people talked about decades ago. And that's just a lot of time and energy that I don't have. And before I go any further, I do have a few caveats. All of the TV shows I have listed from entries 10 to 6 are TV shows in which I might have either seen a single episode of or seen clips of it. The thought process being that by only seeing a single episode or clips of a TV show, you really haven't seen the TV show itself. And all of the TV shows I have listed from entries 5 to 1 are TV shows in which I have never seen a single episode of, not even clips of it. And without further ado, here are the top 10 popular TV shows I have never seen before. Number 10, Game of Thrones. One of the most iconic TV shows to come out of the 2010s that many people describe as being the Lord of the Rings if it had a ton of sex to it. That has a rather infamous reputation, which I'll get into in a few minutes, but the reason as to why I've never seen this TV show comes down to the following reasons. Reason number 1, I remember watching the very first episode of Game of Thrones, and it didn't hook me. Now, sure, I was very impressed by the production design from the sets to the costumes, but as far as the actual, meat of the story is concerned, it didn't draw me in as it did for everybody else. Reason number 2, I never really felt the need to watch the show itself, because when Game of Thrones was being aired on television, I remember seeing posts on various social media outlets of people's reactions to certain episodes of Game of Thrones in terms of what events transpired to what character died. And because of these social media outlets spoiling key character deaths and moments of the show itself, it felt like I was watching the show without actually watching the show. Reason number 3, critically speaking, from what I could gather, Game of Thrones is one of those TV shows that started out great, but as it progressed, it slowly kept getting worse and worse, to a point that many people declare the final season to be the worst season of Game of Thrones. And as I mentioned before, why should I bother watching a TV show that started out great only to end on a disappointing note? Reason number 4, anytime I've heard people talk about Game of Thrones, it's basically been declared as that one show that's infamous for killing off its characters. And here's the thing, why should I bother watching a TV show in which I know a lot of these characters are going to end up dying? And I know some people have made the argument that, hey, even though the show kills off a ton of characters, their deaths serve a purpose. Okay, sure, but my point still stands. If I know going in that a good majority of the cast are going to die, why should I bother investing into these characters in the first place if I know they're going to die? I mean, from what I gathered, there's an entire episode dubbed The Red Wedding, in which had the attitude of, hey, you thought we killed off characters before? We're going to kill off even more characters. And here's the thing, if you think killing off a ton of characters makes for good, compelling storytelling, it doesn't, in my opinion. Reason number 5, when I have read into what Game of Thrones is really about. It just didn't seem like my cup of tea in that sense, where the actual show itself is a slow burn political drama. And the thing is, political dramas are not my cup of tea, which is a reason why I never really got into the show in the first place. And for my final reason as to why I've never got into the show, honestly has to do with its popularity. Because my god, ever since the show first aired, Game of Thrones was everywhere. It was on every single social media platform. It produced a ton of knockoffs. You see people dressing up as the characters at conventions. Or when I look up what are people's favorite TV shows of all time, I guarantee you that Game of Thrones is gonna be on these kind of lists in some shape or form. It was everywhere, and I was sick of seeing it. Number 9, The Office, a sitcom that, from my understanding, is an American remake of a British sitcom that has gained a ton of high praise, with many hailing it as not only is it one of the best American sitcoms to come out of the 2000s, but it's actually one of the few times that an American remake of a British sitcom is better than its original British counterpart, which I find to be surprising given that anytime I've seen a British TV show, no matter if it's a sitcom or a sci-fi show, get remade as an American produced TV series, the American TV series usually doesn't do too well. But for some reason, The Office seems to be the exception to the rule. And much like Game of Thrones, there are a ton of people who also hail The Office as being one of the greatest TV shows of all time. But whereas with Game of Thrones, I only ever saw one episode, The Office, on the other hand, I've only ever seen bits and pieces of episodes, but never a whole episode all the way through. But the reasons as to why I have never seen this TV show, reason number 1, much like Game of Thrones, The Office was just everywhere. And I just saw people talk about nonstop to a point where I never really had much interest in watching the show. Reason number 2, I have said this time and time again, but comedy is super subjective in that sense of you might have some jokes that people might find funny, but the same joke might not be funny to some other people. It really just depends on the person. And for me personally, anytime I've seen clips of The Office, I never thought it was funny to begin with, because it's just the same joke done over and over again from the clips I've seen, where it's you have Steve Carell's character being kind of weird. Then suddenly something happens, you have the main cast trying to figure out how can we solve the problem, and the problem ultimately doesn't get solved, from my understanding. Again, I've only ever seen bits and pieces of episodes here and there. Reason number 3, I don't know if this is its own subgenre of sitcom, but I've never really been a big fan of those workplace mockumentaries. To me, they all just blend together. It just feels like the same joke being told over and over again. Like, I have seen a full episode here and there of Parks and Recreation, and to me, it just felt like another version of The Office. Unless if it's Superstore, because that show is actually pretty funny, and it does have the advantage of just being a regular sitcom by not having it be a mockumentary. Reason number 4, much like Will Ferrell, I'm not really a big fan of Steve Carell as an actor, and when I have seen clips of this TV show that feature his character annoys me so much to a point that I want to strangle him to death. And his character confuses me so much, because here's this weirdo who's clearly not fit to be a manager, yet somehow he gained a high-level manager position. And I'm just wondering, within the context of this universe, who's the idiot that promoted this weirdo? Who thought that was a good idea? And on top of that, I just found most of the cast to be annoying. Maybe not to the same level as Steve Carell's character, but annoying nonetheless. And the more I think about it, I'm also convinced, because of Steve Carell's character, he's probably the main reason as to why I never got into the show to begin with. Number 8, The Simpsons. What is perhaps the most iconic animated sitcom produced to a point that not only did it get a word into the Oxford Dictionary, but many people claim that the show itself also has predicted the future on countless occasions, even though, from my understanding, apparently it never really did that. It just happened to have really good writing that just happened happened to be very coincidental, from my understanding. And as far as my experience with the show is concerned, I've only ever seen bits and pieces of an episode, but I've never seen a whole episode. Unless if you count the, at the time, 2007 theatrical movie, which I have no idea if it's canon to the TV show or not, but I'm not gonna count that here. And here are the reasons as to why I've never seen a whole single episode of The Simpsons. Reason number one, I wasn't really allowed to watch the show back in the day, because I think it was just one of those cases where I think my parents might have seen a whole episode and deemed it inappropriate, so that's probably one reason why I never really got around to watching a whole episode. Reason number two, between elementary school up to middle school, it was just one of those shows that no matter what grade I was in, people just kept talking about it to a point where I just got sick of hearing people talk about it. And keep in mind, this was way before social media such as Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or whatever ever existed. Reason number three, much like The Office, from the few clips I have seen, I just didn't think the show was really all that funny. Reason number four, the animation style to me looked very crude, in that sense where everything from the characters to their environments looked super flat to me, to a point where it didn't look like there was much dimension to it. It just felt like the animators forgot to add depth of field to some of the characters and locations. But I will admit that the show does look very colorful. And before I go any further, I have nothing against crude animation, because with a show like South Park, yes, the animation style is very crude, but it works in the show's favor given that the show has a very crude sense of humor, which is why I think the animation works well for something like that. With The Simpsons, not so much. It just feels so disjointed, at least from the few clips I have seen of the show. And for my final reason as to why I never actually seen the show itself, it is just a severe case of anytime I have heard people talk about, it's always been a classic case of the early seasons were the best, but after season 4 or 5 or something, the show just goes downhill. And why would I bother watching a show if it started out great but then gets worse as it progresses? Number 7, The Walking Dead. Now, much like the previous two entries, I have seen clips of a few episodes. However, unlike The Office and Simpsons, if I had to take all of the clips of The Walking Dead and put them together, I think I've seen about less than an episode's worth of The Walking Dead. And as far as the actual TV show itself is concerned, when I first saw it advertised, I didn't think it was going to be anything that special. I thought it was just going to be a one-season thing that people would talk about for like 2 seconds, but then just disappeared, not to be mentioned again. Then suddenly, The Walking Dead became this huge phenomenon, producing multiple seasons, a variety of spin-offs, you name it. The Walking Dead was clearly a case of a TV show lasting a lot longer than I thought it was going to. But then, over time, every time I kept seeing advertisements for a new season, I just kept sitting there going, really? They're still making more seasons of The Walking Dead? And this just confused me so much. And the reasons as to why I've never really gotten into The Walking Dead come down to the following. Reason number 1, much like Game of Thrones, I thought Walking Dead was just way too popular, to a point where, again, I had seen it on every single social media platform, because anytime I went on my Facebook page, I just kept seeing people talk about the latest episode, to a point where I knew what happened and I know who died. Or if I was looking up people's favorite TV shows of all time, The Walking Dead would be on there. That said, however, something that I did notice as more and more seasons of The Walking Dead were being produced, I noticed that it was losing popularity, because from my understanding, I think sometime after the 3rd or 4th season, the writing to the show went downhill to a point where I think a lot of people started jumping off the bandwagon to such a high degree that when the final episode aired, I saw nobody talk about the TV show whatsoever. And keep in mind, this was the same group of people who watched Game of Thrones. And again, from my understanding, Game of Thrones, during those final few seasons, got bad as it progressed. And I heard more about the final few episodes of the Game of Thrones than I did about The Walking Dead. Reason number 2, I don't like zombies conceptually as a monster, because next to vampires, I think zombies are just lame in that sense where at the end of the day, they're just a mindless husk with very little to no personality. With a vampire, even though I don't like vampires, I at least get the appeal to a vampire because you can give those type of monsters a sense of personality and backstory to them. A zombie, not so much. Although there are some exceptions to the rule, such as Deadman from DC Comics, Frankenstein, more specifically the monster from the classic Universal monster movies featuring Boris Karloff playing Frankenstein's monster, to the rabid sauropod from the Plague of Madness episode of Genndy Tartakovsky's Primal, to the points in time in Naruto where you have villains Orochimaru and his right-hand man Kabuto using the summoning reanimation jutsu to bring back several shinobi to fight our main cast of characters and use them as puppets, which, the more I think about it, is unintentionally a very clever way to tie the term zombie back to its origin, because, fun fact, the word zombie comes from the Congo zumbai, or zombie, which means enslaved spirit, because originally in African lore, a zombie was any person who came under the magical will of a sorcerer. So, in a sense, a puppet to a puppet master. But I'm getting off topic here. And as far as zombies themselves are concerned, I don't mind them being the occasional obstacle in a story for our heroes to fight against, or perhaps there's some kind of entity that's supernatural or cosmic that uses zombies as cannon fodder to fight our heroes. That's okay, but when zombies are just the main thread of the story, I think they're just really boring. Which leads into my third reason, zombie fatigue. Because way before The Walking Dead ever aired on television, zombies were already kind of mainstream, and I was already kind of sick of seeing them. In that sense where they showed up in various entertainment mediums ranging from movies such as the Resident Evil series along with 28 Days Later, to video games again such as Resident Evil along with that one Call of Duty game that had like a zombie survival mode, I don't remember which one that one is, to the Marvel zombie miniseries that came out. You get my point. I was already getting zombie fatigue, but then The Walking Dead came out and the zombie phenomenon just kept coming, which gave me even more zombie fatigue. Number 6. The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. Alright, so I have to do some explanation behind this one for those of you who aren't into anime, but long story short, if you're someone who's into anime like myself, and you're looking to get past all the long-running battle animes ranging from Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, Bleach, and so forth, and you're looking into the more refined examples of what Japanese animation has to offer, usually there's this kind of unofficial rite of passage of, here are the following quintessential animes you have to watch, ranging from the likes of Cowboy Bebop, Neon Genesis Evangelion, Death Note, Orion High School Host Club, Gurren Lagann, so on and so forth, with the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya being on that quintessential list. And unlike some of the other TV shows I have on this list, I actually have to explain what the plot to this anime is about, because with the other 9 shows I have on this list, those are so well known that I really don't need to explain the plot synopsis to each of those shows because of how well known they are. With this, on the other hand, it's a completely different story. But the actual plot to this anime is about this high schooler who befriends this really strange girl who wants to seek out supernatural phenomenon such as aliens, time travelers, and espers, and decides to form a high school club to investigate these mysterious events. And wouldn't you know it, they get 3 more club members that consist of an alien, a time traveler, and an esper, who tell the main character that if Haruhi Suzumiya discovers that she's a cosmic godlike entity, depending on her reaction, all of existence will be destroyed or nothing will happen. And it's up to our main cast of characters to keep her entertained, or else. And when I was coming up with this particular top 10 list, I actually had a hard time trying to figure out where this show should go. Because to me, it went back and forth between being very high on the list or being very low. Because the TV show itself has a movie called The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya, which acts as a continuation of the TV show, which I have seen. But after some contemplating, I just came to the conclusion it should go somewhere in the middle, given that even though I've seen the movie, which is a part of the TV show, I still have not seen the TV show. And here are the reasons as to why I've never seen this beloved anime. Reason number one, despite anime being more mainstream now than it ever was back in the day, with this show being one of the many popular examples of the medium, I can't seem to find this show on any streaming service, no matter if it's something like Netflix, Hulu, to even anime exclusive streaming services such as Crunchyroll or HiDive. Sure, there's probably some illegal site that I could probably watch it on, but I'm trying to do things legally here, which I find to be super surprising given that this is a very highly regarded anime, yet it's not on any streaming service, at least to my knowledge. Reason number two, even though this anime is on my very long list of anime to watch, I have a sort of reluctance about it because something that I've noticed between the time this anime first premiered up to now, I noticed a lot of today's anime try to really replicate that moe vibe that the show produced. Moe being a Japanese term that I think means cute and stupid, from my understanding. Which I think is very unfortunate because before the show ever existed, Japanese animation to me was basically punk rock cartoons. In that sense where it's animation with a lot more grit and backbone that had this sort of adult edge over something like an American cartoon, which I would find to be cute and stupid, depending on the cartoon itself. Or to really emphasize what I mean by punk rock cartoons, imagine going to your friend's house as a kid and you decide to watch that one TV show or movie that you're not allowed to watch at your house because maybe it's not aimed at a younger demographic, it's more adult in nature, and you watch it with your friend and you basically uncovered an entire new world of entertainment that you've never seen before. That's what Japanese animation was to me. Punk rock cartoons, animation with a backbone. And the moment this anime premiered, I feel the entire Japanese animation medium lost that grit and backbone that made the anime medium special to begin with, resulting in a lot of today's anime to be cute and stupid. Sure, there are some examples that harken back to the punk rock cartoon style of anime, but there are far and few in between. Reason number three, the Endless Eight. Now, what is the Endless Eight? Between the two seasons that consist of 13 episodes each, the first season was highly praised when it first came out, but when season 2 came out, it was met with a lot of negative reception because of this one particular story arc. And the actual story arc itself, from my understanding as far as the source material is concerned, is only 1 page long. And at the time, producers of this anime decided, let's take 1 page worth of material and stretch it out into 8 episodes, producing a story arc that you could say is the anime equivalent to Groundhog Day, featuring Bill Murray. However, with Groundhog Day, yes, we see Bill Murray's character repeat the same day over and over again, but at least we see him trying to change certain events over the course of that one day in order to become a better person. With the Endless Eight story arc, you literally have the characters do the exact same thing for 8 episodes straight. Sure, from my understanding, there might be that one line of dialogue that's changed up, and you might have a character who might be wearing a different swimsuit, and there might be a different camera angle at one particular point in the episode, but other than that, it's the exact same episode repeated 8 times. And if you're someone who sat through all 8 episodes without stopping, it gives you a certain level of bragging rights over everybody else if you're someone who sat through all 8 episodes of The Endless Eight. Now, moving forward, all of the TV shows that I'm about to talk about are TV shows in which I straight up have never seen a single episode to, or even clips of it. Or if I have seen clips of it, it might have been through a TV commercial or a trailer, which I don't count. But without further ado, number 5, Tiger King, Murder, Mayhem, and Madness. And I think this is one of those documentary series that, regardless if the 2020 COVID pandemic happened or not, I'm pretty sure this documentary was gonna get blown up one way or the other in regards to having the entire internet talk about just how crazy this documentary was. That said, the reasons why I haven't watched this particular documentary. Reason number 1, I'm not really much of a documentary person. Sure, I might have seen a documentary here or there, but in general, general, I would prefer to watch a movie as opposed to a documentary. Reason number two, when I've heard people talk about this documentary in terms of what actually went down, to me, it didn't seem all that crazy to me. Because I'm someone who's already generally been initiated into watching videos or documentaries about train wrecks. Everything from the filmography of the internet historian to several YouTube videos about some infamous YouTubers such as Randy Sturren, Chris Chan, or on the documentary side of things, I sat through documentaries such as The Tinder Swindler, Fire, The Greatest Party That Never Happened, Tread, and Dear Zachary, which, of those four documentaries, Dear Zachary isn't so much crazy, but really depressing. That said, I do highly recommend these documentaries. However, coming back to Tiger King, on the other hand, when I've heard people talk about the crazy events that went down in this particular documentary series, it didn't seem all that crazy to me because, as I just mentioned a few minutes ago, I've seen my fair share of these YouTube videos about people like Randy Sturren and Chris Chan to a point that it didn't faze me. Reason number three, at the time of the documentaries released back in 2020, because so many people talked about the crazy events that occurred during that documentary, it felt like I heard all of the quote-unquote best parts of the documentary to a point where I never really felt the need to watch Tiger King itself, or any of the seasons that came after the first season. Yes, you heard right, Tiger King got a second and third season, but I guess nobody knew about it because I've seen nobody talk about it. I didn't even know there was a second or third season until I actually was looking up some information about the documentary. And from what I could gather, apparently seasons 2 and 3 were met with negative reviews to a point where they're not gonna even bother doing a fourth season. And in retrospect, I've also heard that Tiger King itself wasn't really all that great to begin with. Sure, I've heard some people say it's a documentary that's not gonna be made for everybody, but even the people who I've listened to who were super intrigued by the documentary stated that the documentary itself isn't really that good to begin with. So why should I even bother checking it out? Although, that said, Joe Exotic as a person just sounds like a fascinating concept in that sense where you're taking a bunch of human characteristics that really shouldn't go together but somehow manage to get into one individual. Since Joe Exotic is your typical racist redneck who happens to be gay. That's a really fascinating concept for an individual. But moving on. Number 4, the BBC Sherlock show. And my reasons for not getting into the show come down to the following. Reason number 1. Although I respect the cultural significance of Sherlock Holmes as a character, I never really got into the Sherlock Holmes phenomenon because it is so gigantic to a point that I don't even know where to start, given that there are countless movies, television shows, books, comic books, you name it. He's in everything. So for me, the character is just way too massive to a point that I perhaps can't get into him. Maybe with 1 or 2 exceptions. Reason number 2. Ever since the 2009 Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movie came out, I swear there's just been an oversaturation of Sherlock Holmes media in regards to the entertainment side of things. Everything from the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies to its Asylum knockoff, the 2015 Holmes movie featuring the actor who played Gandalf the Grey, that one Sherlock Holmes comedy featuring Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, to even movies and shows that, while not about Sherlock, feature him as a character, such as the Netflix Enola Holmes movies with Millie Bobby Brown. Then you have the various TV shows based on Sherlock Holmes, ranging from the 2012 CBS series Elementary to BBC's Sherlock, which, don't worry, I'll get around to talk about the show eventually, to Lupin the Third Part 6, in which we see Lupin and friends having various on-and-off encounters with Sherlock Holmes himself. And sorry for that side tangent, but getting back to the BBC Sherlock, reason number 3, during my college days, the same group of people who loved Game of Thrones also really loved this show. And again, it was just a case of, I think, anytime I heard them talk about the show, I think they just overhyped it for me a bit too much, which made me very cautious of checking out the show. And then on top of that, anytime I did hear them talk about specifics about the show, it to me didn't seem like they talked about the the show because they liked Sherlock Holmes as a character. It just seems like they watched the show because of Benjamin Cumberbatch, or Cumberbatch. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I've heard it pronounced both ways, but anywho, it just seemed like they watched the show because of the actor and not because of Sherlock Holmes himself. And my philosophy is, if you're watching a movie or a TV show because it features a particular actor or actress in it, you're watching the movie for the wrong reasons. And that's the impression I got from this particular group of people. They didn't watch it because of Sherlock Holmes himself, they watched it because of the actor. And reason number 4, from my understanding, most episodes of Sherlock are between 90 minutes up to 2 hours. And at the time when I first heard that, it immediately turned me off, because if I'm going to watch an episode of a TV show, I either like my TV shows to either be 20 to 40 minutes, but a whole 90 to 2 hours. At the time, I didn't think I had the patience for it, because at that point, to me, it's not an episode of a TV show, it's a movie. But given that I sat through season 4 of Stranger Things, in which most episodes averaged between 90 minutes up to 2 hours, so what do I know? And for my final reason as to why I never checked out Sherlock, for my understanding of the premise, it never intrigued me in that sense where it just felt like the writers, in order to make Sherlock relevant in this day and age, all they did was just take the character and just plop them into a modern day setting and change nothing about it, which on pen and paper is ideally what most people should do with a timeless character. But at the same time, it's set in a modern day setting. And that doesn't really excite me, because if I'm going to watch something that's Sherlock Holmes related, it better be a period piece, or maybe do something radically different, like taking that same concept and have it be set in the future. Just having it set in a modern day setting doesn't do it for me. Number 3, Lost. That's right, the hit drama in which everybody, from characters to audience members alike, wondered what the hell was going on. And this show, for those of you who were around when the show premiered, it was the juggernaut show at the time. And when I mean the juggernaut show, I mean it was bigger than Game of Thrones and Walking Dead. It was that big. And keep in mind, when this show premiered, social media was still in its infancy, so people didn't really use it all that often. So when you heard people talk about it, you really did hear people talk about it in person. Although since then, the show itself has gained a rather infamous reputation, which I'll go into in a little bit. And my god, the amount of times I've heard people talk about this, I straight up convinced myself I'd seen an entire episode of Lost. But then in retrospect I realized, wait a minute, I don't think I've ever seen an episode of this TV show because people talked about the show that much. But with that all said, here are the reasons why I never got into Lost. Reason number 1, I am so sorry for being a broken record here, but if you haven't noticed already, the reason why I don't normally check out a TV show is because of its popularity. As I mentioned with TV shows such as Game of Thrones or Walking Dead, for those exact same reasons. With the only major difference being that, unlike Game of Thrones or Walking Dead, which were constantly talked about on social media, Lost was constantly talked about in person. But, long story short, the show was too popular at the time of its airing. Moving on. Reason number 2, the channel in which Lost aired on, I don't think my household had access to, or if we did, I don't think we knew about it. Then again, I don't even remember what channel the show aired on, so that's probably another possibility altogether. Reason number 3, the method of storytelling used for the actual show itself. Because the longer the show went on for, I just gradually stopped paying attention to it because it was just one of those kind of shows where people talked about that so much, it just became background noise. But when the final episode aired, I heard so many people discuss just how disappointed they were in that final episode. And turns out, when I look up any information on Lost, in that sense of people talking about the show, apparently that final episode is so bad, it's often tied in first place for top 10 worst TV finales of all time. It was that bad. And as I reiterated, why should I bother investing time in a TV show only for it to end on a bad note? And to add on top of that, from my understanding, J.J. Abrams was a producer of this, and the man loves his mystery box, in which you set up a mystery, but you never solve it. And given what I know of the show in that sense where for every one mystery that gets solved, 20 more mysteries take its place. And because you had this show that ran for 6 seasons, and by the time you got to this final episode, you literally had 6 seasons worth of mysteries that ultimately never got answered. Because, according to someone like J.J. Abrams, even though we have a mystery, it's not about the mystery, it's about the characters. Although, from my understanding, when people look back at the show, evidently it seemed as if the characters weren't that well written to begin with, which I find to be ironic. Number 2. My God, when coming up with this list, I discovered that there's a fair share amount of children's cartoons that a lot of people my age group really love and watched. Everything from Gravity Falls, Amphibia, The Owl House, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, The Legend of Korra, among many others, to a point where I probably make my own top 10 list based off these cartoons. But if there's one cartoon I kept hearing about over and over again in terms of its overall quality that everybody seems to have an opinion on, is Steven Universe, a cartoon that many hail as not only one of the best modern day cartoons to be produced by Cartoon Network, but what many consider to be the best animated cartoon of all time. Put it on par with other Cartoon Network shows ranging from the likes of Samurai Jack to the Justice League cartoons. And my reasons as to why I've actually never seen this TV show come down to the following. Reason number 1, I remember seeing a couple TV spots or a trailer for Steven Universe, and I was not impressed with the advertising for the show. And the show to me honestly just didn't look good, to a point that I honestly thought this was going to be one of those shows Cartoon Network produced that would last one season, get canceled, and then get largely forgotten about. But sure enough, the show lasted 5 seasons, a movie, and got high praise from both critics and audience members alike. Reason number 2, I find the combination of the character designs and the colors used on them to be cartoony. And I know what you're thinking. Wait, your problem with the character designs are that the cartoons are too cartoony? Yes, and on top of that, they all have that visual aesthetic that I am sick of seeing. I don't know how to describe it, but it's just one of those cases where it doesn't really look different than any other cartoon from the 2010s. Because if you were to take a couple cartoon characters from the early 2000s, such as SpongeBob, Danny Phantom, Samurai Jack, to Pepper Ann, and put them in the room together, you could tell that even though they're cartoons, they all came from different cartoons because they're all designed differently and look different from one another. Yet, if you were to take the main characters from Steven Universe, Gravity Falls, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, or Adventure Time and put them in a room together, if you didn't know any better, you could have sworn they all came from the same TV show because they look so much alike. Everything from having those thick lines, similar kind of color schemes, to even having those bean-shaped mouths. It's just, I don't know what kind of visual style this is, but I'm sick of seeing it. As far as the color scheme is concerned, it's colorfully horrendous to a point where it looked as if someone took glitter and mixed it with ice cream sprinkles, and that's the overall visual look of Steven Universe to me. Because on top of having just too much color, there's also a lack of detail between characters and their environments. It's honestly the same problem I had with the visual aesthetics of The Simpsons, in that sense where the characters and backgrounds look like they're on the same plane. It doesn't look like there's dimension to it whatsoever. But at least with The Simpsons, they knew how to use color. Actually, another example I could think of is Gravity Falls. Even though I've never seen an episode of that show, I've seen clips of it. And even though I really don't like the character designs, at least the way in which the creators use color in that show is very well balanced. And on top of that, there's a lot more textures to the environment to a point where the characters and backgrounds are not on the same plane. It actually looks like there's dimension within the TV show, and looks as if it were made by a group of professionals. Steven Universe, on the other hand, looks like it was made by a group of amateurs who made something for YouTube, which is sad because I've seen some quality animations on YouTube itself that look more professional than Steven Universe. And for my third and final reason as to why I've actually never seen this TV show, honestly has nothing to do with the show itself. It has to do with the fan base, because my God, these people scare me to a point that they make the Star Wars fandom look more civilized, and the Star Wars fan base is toxic already. And not only that, but I think the fan base for the show is really screwed up. Because I remember reading about this one event where the fandom sent a bunch of death threats to an artist because the artist in question drew the characters in a very particular way and told them to jump off a building. And you know what happened? That particular artist actually did jump off a building. Thankfully, she survived the incident. However, the fan base in question saw this as an accomplishment and bragged about it. But not only that, but they also found that artist again and went, "You didn't go through with it? Weak." And that is perhaps one of the most screwed up mindsets I've ever come across in a fandom. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are literally several videos out there talking about just how toxic the fan base is for this TV show. It's something else, I tell you. And as far as the fans are concerned, anytime I see people praise the show, I see a lot of the fan base love the characters because they are a part of the LGBTQ community, or they have that sort of representation. And here's the thing, if you love a character because of how well written they are in regards to their personality, their backstory, their visual aesthetic, and they just so happen to be a part of the LGBTQ community or have that sort of representation, it's alright. But if you like a character because they represent the LGBTQ community, then we got a problem. And that's the thing about the prize I'm hearing, because I've just been seeing the fanbase love these characters because they have that type of representation. And that is the problem. And before I go any further, here are some honorable mentions. Hunter x Hunter, the 90s version. Hunter x Hunter, the 2011 reboot. Full House, Black Mirror, Squid Game. With the exception of Kamen Rider the first movie, the entire Kamen Rider franchise. 24, American Idol, Jersey Shore, Mad Men. And for my final honorable mention goes to none other. And now coming in at number 1 for the most popular TV show that I have never seen is Breaking Bad. That's right, I have never seen a single episode of this juggernaut. And when I mean juggernaut, I mean a TV show that is so iconic that many people consider it to be one of the best, if not the best TV series of all time. And here are the reasons as to why I have never seen this TV show. Reason number 1. Okay, I swear, this will be the last time I bring this point up, but the TV show's popularity. And my God, the amount of praise this show got was insane. It does not matter if you were on social media or talking to someone in person, it was everywhere. And again, much like Game of Thrones, anytime I've seen people bring up one of their favorite TV shows of all time, Breaking Bad is usually on that list, usually coming in at number 1. Reason number 2, because Breaking Bad gets such high praise from both critics and audience members alike, that I'm actually scared to watch the show, because I'm afraid that if I end up watching the show, it's not going to live up to the hype. I know that might sound like a strange reason to not watch a TV show, but if you ever saw my top 10 iconic or well-known movies I've never seen before, you remember what I said about my number 1 pick on that list. The same kind of logic applies here, because I'm just like, again, afraid that if I ever saw the show and I didn't like it, I particularly don't want to be at the receiving end of people who love the show to death and think maybe I don't have good taste in TV shows. Reason number 3, the advertising. Because anytime I saw ads for the show on TV, it just didn't look good to me whatsoever. And my God, there was this one TV spot for Breaking Bad that was pretty infamous to me that really made me not want to watch the TV show. And for context, at the time, me and my family were watching some movie on AMC, and of course you have those bumpers in between stating, now playing movie such and such, up next, Scarface, and later, see how Walter White becomes Scarface. And I kid you not, that's actually how they advertised Breaking Bad one time. And this confused me and my family so much, we all just looked at each other, wondering, wait, is Breaking Bad a prequel to Scarface? And they really got the guy that played Hal from Malcolm in the Middle to play Al Pacino's character? What a weird casting choice. That was probably the big reason why I never saw the show to begin with, was because of that little TV spot. It just left us with such confusion that we never checked out the show itself. And I'm not making this up neither. Reason number 4. I have said this once before, but I'm not the biggest fan of crime dramas. They're just not my bread and butter. Case in point, I listed other crime dramas such as Mad Men and The Sopranos in my honorable mentions section. And the final reason as to why I've never seen a single episode of Breaking Bad, honestly, is a reason that I can't really justify, but I never felt the need to watch the show. I can't really explain why, but it was just one of those shows that, to me, I just didn't really care for it. Like, I can't explain it any other way other than I just never felt the need to watch it. Plain and simple. I know that's not much to go on, but that's all I got. So, what are some popular TV shows you've never seen before? And see you later.